Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, I hope you took my spoiler warning to heart earlier the last few days ago, because this is going to be spoilers throughout from the very beginning. Apologies about the thumbnail, by the way. There is literally no way to talk about this topic in depth without putting the subject matter in both the thumbnail and title, so for those of you who are getting out from behind a rock now, yes, there is a new enemy faction or race coming to Destiny 2 The Final Shape, and they're known as the Dread. If you want to stop being spoiled, I mean, you know, your spoiler warning was just there. My apologies. Get back under the rock if you really need to. Seriously, you should be there by now. The reveal has cast us off into a realm of completely new things, so yeah, get ready for this. Today, though, I wanted to talk about the Dread and give some initial observations of what we can glean about them. What we see here on the face of it would seem unfamiliar and terrifying, but on a slightly deeper examination, I think we can assume that there is some more horrifying stuff happening with the Dread. Something which makes perfect sense for the Witness and gives us perhaps an idea of its own twisted vision for our future, should the Final Shape be enacted. So, our initial reveal of the Dread from the Final Shape showcase the other day gave us a few concrete details. First and foremost, this is the Witness's core faction, and it is of its own design. That means that these beings are probably a direct extension of its will in a way that even the Taken couldn't be. It's something to say that these are perhaps part of the Witness, given the Witness's nature as a compound being of many individuals. We'll unpack more about that later down the line because I guarantee it'll be worth noting. Secondly, the Dread are a faction that we've seen before in part. The Tormentors that we saw in Lightfall are also members of the Dread, as are the Subjugators who were teased in the initial reveal of the Final Shape. Thirdly, we know the names of all the different units within the faction, and what their purpose is. These small flyers are first up, and they're known as Grim. Their tactics include the ability to swarm their targets with great numbers and overwhelm them with suppressing screams that will also slow the target down. There are the Husks, who have a comparatively simple combat tactic of rushing the enemy down with their wicked blades and raw ferocity. They are fast-moving, but Husks have a deadlier surprise in the form of Geists, small flyers that are ejected from Husks upon their death and will detonate on the nearest adversary. All that speed and ferocity is for a purpose. Even in death, they are still dangerous. The Attendants and Weavers are two sides of the same coin, creating a gun line of troops whilst also adding powers of Strand and Stasis to the battlefield. While Attendants can freeze and slow their foes down with Stasis, Weavers will use Strand to pull us from our current location towards them, creating conditions that leave their enemies with less control over where they're placed on the battlefield. Subjugators are supposedly based off the Witness's most loyal disciple, Rulk. His form and his reverence of the Witness have been reforged into these elite commanders of the Witness's forces, which are also armed with the powers of Stasis and Strand. And of course, there are the well-known Tormentors, first deployed on Neomuna and Earth by the Witness's forces as they searched for the Veil and moved to suppress resistance from humanity respectively. Seemingly based off of Nezarec, these lumbering beasts are capable of suppressing enemy targets with various void powers, leaving them vulnerable to the brute force of their follow-up strikes. These combatants are fearsome in their own right, but in these first few moments we're also able to take a closer look at them, and as I stated earlier, the initial observations that we can make are pretty troubling. First of all, I think we need to quickly re-examine the Witness's philosophy behind those it chooses to serve in its armies, which can be seen in the Scorn, Taken, and Shadow Legion very well. Above all, the Witness wants obedience from these forces, and thus, those under the Witness's command are often compelled to do its bidding without a degree of freedom or self-determination. But the Taken are the clearest and most twisted example of this. These combatants have literally been abducted and are then husked out by the darkness and returned to the battlefield empowered by it, completely subservient to the Witness's will. Whenever the Taken are changed from their original form, the process is one that is often described in the lore as one of sharpening. bringing them closer to the ultimate logic of perfection that could originally be seen in the Hive's sword logic, but which is now better understood as being closer to the Witness's final shape. I think we can see something similar here with the Dread, and the evidence of it is stated right in the developer reveal that Bungie just dropped. Take a listen to Katarina here, who describes the Attendant and the Weaver very briefly.
The Weaver and the Attendant are our Strand and Stasis scions that have been reshaped by the Witness.
That is our first and most direct hint to the nature of the Dread more generally. The Attendants and the Weavers are literally scions that have been reshaped by the Witness into a part of what it believes its final shape might be. They have been changed. In this form, they are clearly not only subservient to it and completely loyal, but they also wield the powers of darkness. You can even see the similarities in physiology when it comes to these enemies and the scions that they are supposedly based on. Let's put them side by side. You can see the same number of limbs, obviously, and, more importantly, the same number of digits on their hands. And of course, the characteristic singular eye of the scions is there too. They even look to be the same height and build, minus the additions made of pyramid tech. In this sense, a comparison is really easy. Scions have clearly been taken here and twisted by the Witness into its new forces. This is something which bodes very ill for Euryx and her Scion rebels. It's likely that she has been corrupted in this sense, and maybe she is one of the Witness's more elite attendants or weavers. If this is the case, then the horrifying reality of the final shape has been witnessed by them more intimately than any others in the world. But it does also raise intriguing questions. Seemingly both Nezarec and Rolk have had units based off of their forms that have been twisted into sharper, more perfect versions of what they were. It's pretty disconcerting understanding where the Scions came from, knowing that it was probably from Euryx's Scion rebels, but it then makes you ask the question, where do the bodies of the Tormentors and the Subjugators come from? And I fear the answer may be really disconcerting. We don't know what Nezarec's original species was, but we do know that Rolk came from Lubrae, and he was the last Lubraean. He went to the city of Lubrae after the Witness had gifted him with its power. In this moment, he slaughtered his family and killed thousands, maybe millions of other Lubraeans by enacting the destruction of their two sons and their planet in turn. But the terrifying reality is, we don't know what happened to the remains, and it may be the case that the Witness has subsumed them in a horrifying vision as well. Keep in mind there is a big question mark over that notion. The Lubraeans were visited by the Traveler, but this may be one of the first Traveler-blessed civilizations that the Witness interacted with. And so it leaves us with an interesting question. Did the Witness still harbor the same hatred towards the Lubraeans that it did towards us, meaning that it drew out their suffering in the way that it chose to with Rolk? Does this mean that they are not able to be part of the final shape? Does this mean that the bodies of the Subjugators are indeed the bodies of Lubraeans repurposed? I don't know. It's really hard to tell on that particular note, but we do know that the Scions make up the Attendants and the Weavers, which leaves some pretty disconcerting stuff. Furthermore, it makes us ask even more of those questions regarding Nezarec. Is Nezarec's original species also being saved in some kind of form by the Witness, and then being repurposed? Or is it the case that the name Imprint of Nezarec, which is seen on some elite Tormentors, gives us just an idea of what the Witness needs, merely an imprint? Maybe it is the case that this is the only reason why there is a similarity. Maybe that's better for the sake of the Scions. But even as I say all of this, you then have to sit and ask yourself a further question. What about the husks? Well, let's talk about husks. Sharp-eyed observers may have made the note that husks have characteristics that potentially give away their origins, and that's also rather alarming. If you look closely at the husks in this screenshot, you will notice a few important things about their physiology. Looking at this art, you will be able to see that they have 3 digits on each hand, and much more notably, 3 eyes. There is only one species in the entirety of Destiny's history that I know of that fits this description physiologically, and yes, it's the Hive. But what's even more terrifying, and the thing that absolutely seems to give the game away, is not the fact that the Hive and the Husk have similar physiology, but it's the final parting gift of the Husk, the Geist. The Hive are unique in the sense that they are actually compound creatures. They have within them a form of mutualism by creating the pact with the worm gods. In the process of making their blood tithe, every hive consumes one of the worm gods' larvae so that they can tithe destruction to the worms and their ascendant hive masters, whilst gaining immortality. When a hive dies, their worm will subsume them, and they are separated from them on death. We can actually see this with some of the hive in-game, although they don't particularly last very long outside their host, particularly in the presence of a guardian. The hive worms look like this. Now take a look at the Geists. Yeah, 3 eyes again, and also a very similar shape, even similar motifs and ideas with regards to the sort of armoring and even coloring of the Geist. More importantly though, just like the way that the hive worms leave the hive after they have died, Geists appear from husks after the husk dies. So it appears that the husks might be twisted hive, and that the Geists within them might be the twisted children of the worm gods. This leaves the Grimm, which is a bit of an anomaly within the group, because in itself, we've seen no creature that really compares to the Grimm. There are a few flying creatures in Destiny, but none that would easily fit into this particular role. And to be really clear about things, no, I don't think I'm going to count Oryx and Savathun as these, because, yeah, they are individual hive, and they are godlike in power. They are not typical. It is not normal for hive to have wings. The Witness has certainly eliminated plenty of alien species that have been subsumed into itself, so it's not impossible that one of those species was turned into the Grimm. I saw a few people out there stating an even worse possibility, which is that these might be based on the Eliksni, based on the number of limbs. Remember that the Eliksni have 6 limbs, 4 arms and 2 legs, and as it turns out, the Grimm have 6 limbs, 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 wings, implying that the upper set of Eliksni arms would have been turned into the Grimm's wings. Now, I personally think that is a bit of a stretch. The concept art being shown might be old or subject to change, but in the vidoc you can clearly see that the Grimm have 4 digits on their hands, instead of the typical 3 that an Eliksni would. Their feet are a good match for the Eliksni, including some kind of raptorial claw on the back of the foot, but this alone isn't enough of an indication that they are Eliksni, and it also doesn't explain the largest physiological difference between the Grimm and the Fallen, which is the tail. As far as I know, there is no species we've encountered in Destiny that has a true tail, so ultimately it's a little bit tricky to sit there and say that these are the Eliksni without any further proof. What's even more frustrating with the Grimm is that they don't appear to have any facial features, with their face having been replaced with pyramid tech, which they will then use to emanate their terrible scream from. Regardless of the anomaly that is the Grimm, I think it's really clear. The Dread are the Witness's own forces, and it has molded those forces in its image. And I mean that in a quite literal sense. This is the end result of its meddling with those that it has overwhelmed and subsumed. This is the fate of all that serve the Witness. Most horrifying of all is this simple idea. We may well be looking at our own fate should we fail. The Witness seeks to subsume the universe into its perfect final shape. If we fail, there is no doubt in my mind that we will also be twisted, just as the other forces of the Witness have, into a more perfect, final version of us. This might be the fate of every human or awoken or other civilian of some kind in Sol, should the Witness succeed. We will all be reduced to monstrous contortions of ourselves, bound in eternal servitude. This leaves in my mind a pair of harrowing questions. How was this accomplished? And could this be done without the Witness? If the Dread are made by a more tangible process, then we need to discover it and contain it as soon as possible. Failure will lead to the Dread flooding out across the system and being controlled by those less scrupulous powers that might see uses for them. That is, of course, if the process is possible without the witness and is tangible enough to be replicated. Success in controlling this might at least contain the Grimm to the heart of the traveler, for now. But there is something else that really worries me. Dread in itself is a word that conjures the image of fear. If the witness is defeated, who's to say that there aren't others who might make use of such fear? I can think of at least one somewhat defeated eldritch god of sorts that has a means for fear to be used, a way that it's been used before. I am, of course, talking of Nezarec. If Nezarec does live on, who's to say it wouldn't bend the dread to its will? That is my ultimate fear for things going forward. Even if we do defeat the witness, understanding the origins of the dread is now of paramount importance. Should we fail to do so, there is no telling what will happen. If the enemy is capable of replicating this process, then a far more horrifying fate awaits all those in the future, and the dread may be here to stay. But that's all from me for now. If you enjoyed the initial look at this, go ahead and hit subscribe, and keep in mind that we'll be making more stuff on the Final Shape and its lore going forward. So, if you enjoyed the video, also go ahead and hit a like, and remember that you can leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. In particular, I'm interested in 2 bits. What do you think the origin point for the Grimm is? I've heard all sorts of suggestions at this point, from them being the remnants of the Taisha Bethi to them being simply the Elixni that have been twisted, and I'm not truly convinced by any of them, but I'd love to hear what you think. And secondly, I want to know what you think about the process of the creation of the Dread. How do you think it's done? Do you think it's possible to replicate? And do you believe that there might be more Dread in the future? Let me know down below in the comments section. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.